How do you know when you should do a business forecast? There are a couple of key times that you may want to consider doing one. Now, in one of our past videos, we talked about the difference between a budget and a forecast. And a forecast, as a reminder, is something that is not as finite as a budget. It's usually done not for a full year. It might be, but that's a lot less common. It is usually not attached to the company's fiscal year. In other words, if you do a budget for January through December, you don't necessarily do a forecast for January through December, but you might do a forecast for the third quarter or for the last 6 months of the year. And some of the biggest reasons that you would do that are what we're going to talk about right now. Now, these are not the only reasons, and what I'm about to talk about is pretty broad. So there's a lot of different things that could happen within here, and I'll give you some examples in just a minute. So the first reason that you may want to consider doing a forecast is that there's been some sort of key event that has happened, either inside your company or in your industry or in the marketplace that's going to affect your ability to do business, and how you're going to do business and what you think the results are going to be. And this can be going any direction. So as an example, there are times when you could have a competitor exit the marketplace. They may close the doors. They may decide that they're not going to offer that type of product or service anymore. They may simply close down the store or offer that they have in your geographic area. There's all different kinds of ways that that could show up. Now, it's possible that they've decided to do that because they just don't have the demand, in which case there may not be a lot of impact on you. They probably had customers that are going to need to go someplace else, but depending upon, again, the driver for the reason that they've exited that part of the business, it may or may not have a lot of impact on your company, your client's company, whomever you're doing the forecast for, but it could. And so there's certainly a reason to consider doing a forecast as you look at the potential additional demand that may be coming into your company as a result of that. The other things that we've seen in terms of doing a forecast certainly happened during the pandemic when some businesses had to completely shift their business models, or they couldn't offer products and services in the same way for a period of time. And that was something that had to be taken into consideration from a forecast perspective. The other times you may want to do a forecast are on the expense side. So if you have experienced unexpected or greater than expected wage inflation from your employees and what needs to be paid, if you have some sort of facility costs that weren't anticipated, like a large repair bill. Even if you don't own the facility, there are often times where the tenants of a building will have to pay for at least a portion of the repairs. If you have machinery and equipment, there are often times where there's downtime or repairs that weren't anticipated or are in excess of the budget that has been allotted for those. If those items are big enough, and or if you have three of those things happening, you may want to consider doing a forecast. The next element that I want to talk about and when you might want to consider it is if there is some sort of macroeconomic event. So in the first case, we're really talking about things that are directly a result of things inside the company or limited to the company, or it's a direct competitor. In this case, what I'm talking about are things like interest rates. So as an example, we have a lot of clients that are in the construction industry, and they have both residential and commercial customers. And in either case, most of those projects are being built with money that is going to have to be borrowed. And to the extent that interest rates are rising, the demand for the end product is going to be affected because it's just going to be more expensive to buy. Now, The degree to which that's going to impact their business is to be determined. The timing of that is going to be determined. It's hard to know whether that is going to take 6 months to be felt, because there are jobs that are already booked. There are houses that are already purchased and that are in the process of being completed. There are already commercial projects that are moving along with construction loans whose interest rates are going to adjust. And it's unlikely that those things are going to change immediately. But 3 months or 6 months from now, the expected demand is lower than it was when we were doing the budget, at the end of last year. So we're 6 months into the new year. And while most of the year has performed as expected, the fall and the winter are expected to be a little bit less than was budgeted. So we may want to do a forecast with those clients to help them really kind of consider if they need to make other changes. If the demand is going to drop by a big enough amount, they may need to look at their staffing and the other expenses and maybe some of the investments they were going to make. The third time you might want to do a forecast is if your budget isn't working anymore. So we already had a video where we talked about what to do when the budget isn't working, but one of the things as it relates to forecasting is that if you have enough assumptions in the budget that have shifted or proven not to be true, if your timing differences are becoming permanent, then it might be the time to do a forecast. And the biggest reason that you would do that is simply because you need some way to make business decisions, and you need to be able to do those based on facts. Not having any guideposts or parameters around which to make decisions, or even parameters around which to analyze what's really going on in the business, is a reason to consider going through a forecast process. So, as an example, let's say that the budget assumed 100 customers and they were all buying at an average price point. And you may find that you have 100 customers and the average price point that they're purchasing at is 25% less than what was assumed in the budget. Um, even if so you may add customers and that can make up the gap, but now you have a rate volume discrepancy between your budget and what's actually happening. And if that is a big enough gap, and if it is a dynamic or an assumption that is going to continue, then you'll want to look at a forecast and whether the fulfillment of that revenue is going to cause your cost structure to change. Now, you can do that forecast exercise without doing a full-blown forecast. What you're simply doing is you're changing some basic metric or input assumptions that you had in your budget, and it can just give you some directional information about whether that gap on a go forward basis is enough of a reason to consider doing a forecast that would augment or even potentially replace parts of your budget. So those are the 3 times that I would consider a forecast. One, when you've got something that really is right inside your company or very, very close to home, like a competitor exiting the marketplace. 2 is when there's a significant macroeconomic issue that's going to eventually have an impact on your business. And 3, when the budget really has some gaps in it that need to be addressed. Maybe not enough to completely redo the budget, but enough to make you look at some key components. Please let me know which of those tips resonated the most with you, and also be sure to subscribe to our channel.